Boxing Gorillas is my first novel. It's about a guy named Mason Burke, who's a recent college graduate. He's also a failing musician whose band has just broken up. He moves to Gulf Shores to try and put his life in some sort of order and perspective, and winds up running afoul of a group of drug smugglers who are kind of hell-bent and intent on making Gulf Shores, this little coastal enclave, their new port of call. And I guess if there's a twist to it, is that all of Mason and all of his friends are all strung out drug addicts. So now you've got a group of drug addicts who have to find a way to take down a group of drug smugglers in this little coastal town. I guess I started getting interested in writing when I was a young teenager, probably 13, 14. I got grounded one time. My stepfather grounded me for a party that I threw with some friends at my parents' old condo. And part of my punishment was he didn't feel like I was reading enough. I always watched a lot of movies. I was kind of a child of the 80s. You know, everything was movies. So I was given a book called Flashman by my stepfather, which is a book by a guy named George MacDonald Fraser. And that book was probably the first book I ever had that did the same thing to me as movies did. It actually transported me to that place in a way that I hadn't been short of the movies. And I think that was the first time that I ever considered being a writer, because it was a very magical thing. I was a child of the Star Wars generation, Indiana Jones, those kind of things. Movies that really took you outside of the element and really brought you into the story. Flashman was the first thing that ever really brought me in like that. One author that's influenced me the most would be Hunter S. Thompson. I got turned on to Hunter when I was a kid, for better or for worse. I had a friend of mine give me a copy of The Great Shark Hunt when I was very young, and I just devoured it. I loved the way Hunter used his words. Hunter was so sharp and could cut to the chase quicker than anybody I'd ever seen and still have ever seen. He was witty, he was smart, he was insightful, and I think a lot of people bought into the Hunter image, but if you dug through all that stuff, the guy that existed underneath was one of the sharpest writers of the 20th century. And I really think he's missed, his voice is missed in this world, and he was just such a big influence on me as a writer, and still is to this day. I had had a lot of titles hanging around for a long time on a sheet of paper, probably 40 or 50 titles. And Boxing Gorillas is one of them. I think it just kind of subconsciously made it onto the page. But it was the only one of the entire group that actually had a direct correlation to the book. There is actually a fight between one of the characters and a gorilla. And you can kind of imagine how that works out. But there's also a deeper level on it that I think the idea of actually having to fight a gorilla works on that kind of Jaws thing of we're going to need a bigger boat. It's somebody fighting against the insurmountable odds. Well, the time that I actually lived in Gulf Shores was a very special time for me. It was a lot of fun. It was a different kind of place than it is today. Gulf Shores has grown up a lot since I actually lived there in the late 90s. It's still a lot of fun, and it's still a great place to go. It's just different. It was one of the last kind of lost beach communities left on the Gulf of Mexico. It was just pretty wild and free, and it wasn't your Panama City meat market. It wasn't Pensacola Beach. It wasn't Galveston. It was its own little unique place on the Gulf of Mexico. It's one of the only soulful places that I've found down there that wasn't corrupted by just cheap plastic garbage. So I wanted to kind of just send a love letter to that time. So amongst all the violence and insanity that exists in the book, there's still a little nugget of how beautiful that place was at that point in time. And I just want to capture that for other people to try and experience it. The characters in my book are based on people I know, to a greater or lesser extent. I see them all in my head as very individual people, but their personalities are probably more a mishmash of most everybody I know in my life. Each one of the major characters probably has 2 or 3 character traits from some of my best friends, all kind of glued together and Frankenstein together into these little kind of vignettes of these people. I'm not sure that any one of my friends could say that, you know, that's me, that one character is me. But I'm sure that they will be able to recognize bits of themselves in all of this. Lately I've been reading The Winds of Dune, which is Kevin J. Anderson and Brian Herbert, the son of Frank Herbert, who have carried on the Dune series. And their latest book, Winds of Dune, picks up in between 2 of the original Dune novels, and that's been kind of my new thing. But I've been working so hard on my own stuff that I really haven't stopped that much to read. But every time a new Dune book comes out, I make it a point to just stop and focus on that for a couple of weeks. Absolutely, there will be a sequel. I'm sketching it out right now and just trying to put all the pieces together. I have it in my head of where I want it to go, but it's a process. But if you go to boxinggorillas.com, you'll be able to keep up. I'll be blogging and updating on the process of the book, and come check it out.